Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's late. We're jumping right into that music fact of the day. Michael Jackson's song Human Nature was written by the keyboard player from Toto, whose name is Steve Porcaro. He was working on the Thriller album at the time, and earlier in the day, he had a conversation with his daughter that sort of inspired this song. She'd had a really bad day at school. I think she had gotten hurt, maybe had been hit by a boy, and she kept asking her dad, why? And so when he got to the studio, he kind of worked it out. It all came together, and I definitely think that is one of Michael Jackson's best songs. So, big news of the day, Danilo Cavalcante. He has been captured shortly after 8 a.m. They got him. Border Patrol and the Pennsylvania State Police were the ones who took him into custody. What I find amazing is the fact that there were no injuries to law enforcement, to the public, or to Danilo, because we know he had stolen that .22 rifle. I really kind of anticipated maybe a shootout. I mean, I don't think he had much to lose, but the element of surprise was in favor of law enforcement today, which I think helped the situation come to a peaceful resolution. They worked a perimeter, and shortly after midnight, they had a burglar alarm at a residence near Prizer Road, which was within that perimeter. Nothing came from the search when law enforcement responded, but it did bring an influx of law enforcement to that specific area. They had already been close by, and around 1 a.m., they had a fixed-wing aircraft in the air, and a heat signal was detected. So tactical teams came to that heat source location, but in came a storm, and there was lightning flashing, and so the aircraft had to leave the area. But what did the tactical team do? They held that parameter until the storm passed so that they could bring that aircraft back, and also so that he couldn't escape. And shortly after 8 a.m., they converged to where the heat source was, and they were very stealthy about it. Danilo had no idea he was surrounded, and the tactical team held that element of surprise. He did try to escape. He started to crawl through this thick underbrush with that stolen rifle on his person. One of the Customs and Border Patrol teams had a canine named Yoda with them, released the hound, and the dog subdued Danilo, giving him a little minor scalp injury, but it bled worse than it really was. It was probably just a little boo-boo, but it looked like a gusher because, you know, the scalp is very vascular. Lieutenant Colonel Bivens told CNN when the dog got to him, he then went flat with the dog on him. The dog was able to detain him there. The dog is quick and has the ability to disable someone and take them off guard so they're not able to do anything like fire a gun, use a knife or whatever, or escape. That minor wound was treated on scene, and he was taken to the police station for further processing and an interview. It wasn't long after he was captured. They had him rolling down the highway to go to prison to serve that life sentence in the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Deborah. The district attorney, Deb Ryan, praised law enforcement, said the nightmare is finally over and the community can finally get back to normal. I think they had shut down some schools, and I can't imagine just living in that general vicinity, knowing that somebody like him is on the loose and has been going into garages and things like that. I wouldn't have slept a wink. I'd have been sitting up like with my revolver. I don't know if you guys remember that Stand By Me scene where Vern has to do the watch that night. And so every time a cricket like chirps, he's moving. That would have been me. She said everyone involved in hunting him dealt with horrendous conditions, terrain problems, and a ton of obstacles that prevented them from capturing him sooner. One of the first calls they made was to his ex-girlfriend's family. They were very relieved, obviously. And her sister, Sarah, said they can finally sleep again. So a reporter during the question and answer portion of this presser asked about this photo op with Danilo after his capture and mentioned that there was a lot of criticism and asked the reasoning behind this photo. If you haven't seen it, it has Danilo right in the middle, and there are probably 50 tactical team members, law enforcement people, agents behind him, and also Yoda the dog in there. He said that these men and women worked amazingly hard through trying circumstances, and he said he wasn't bothered at all that they took the photo. It's not like the photo was released by law enforcement, but a helicopter kind of caught them taking that picture. Might be something they just keep for themselves, but I read a pretty decent amount of split online today. Either people thought it was fine because this guy is a convicted murderer, very brutally murdering his ex-girlfriend, stabbing her nearly 40 times in front of her two young kids, and he's wanted in Brazil for the murder of a student over apparently some car repairs that weren't paid for. When asked if Danilo said anything to anybody after his capture, Lieutenant Colonel Bivens said they needed to use an interpreter, and he, at that point, was being taken back to that police station. They would attempt to interview him while he was there. But at the time of his capture, Bivens was not aware of anything that Danilo said. They did have the authority to use lethal force, but obviously they didn't have to. When he was placed in the van, they cut the Philadelphia Eagles sweatshirt off of him, and Bivens said this is standard procedure. One reporter asked if he was found sleeping, and Bivens said he was prone and did try to crawl away. He just didn't have the opportunity to engage because they were so stealthy in surrounding him, and that dog really prevented him from being able to do much. He was in close proximity to the location where the heat signal went off just after 1 a.m. this morning, and the DEA, as we know, found that with that fixed-wing aircraft in the air. Bivens says he doesn't know if Danilo was necessarily skilled in survival, but really more desperate at this point. He was asked about any help that Danilo may have had, and Bivens said there were people who intended to assist him, but they were successful in preventing that assistance. A reporter asked about his sister assisting him, and Bivens said yes. So she was arrested over the weekend by ICE on an overstay here in the U.S. and apparently refused to help in the investigation. She's currently in deportation proceedings. He had only the rifle and the clothes on his back when he was caught, nothing else. There were about 20 to 25 members of law enforcement in the immediate vicinity when he was arrested. There were tactical teams who wore camouflage, and they also were carrying long rifles. Once they identified him and moved in, the whole process of capturing him took around 5 minutes. Once law enforcement was in position, he detected them, and that's when he tried to crawl away. They will talk to the DA to see if there will be any additional charges to anybody who is going to help him. And the reporter mentioned his sister again, but Bivens does not anticipate there will be charges. I guess at this point, they're probably just going to deport his sister and that's it. When asked why he thought Danilo stopped, if it was due to the weather or anything like that, Bivens said he thinks his normal pattern of travel was late in the evening and during the overnight hours, but whether he got tired or not, he just doesn't know. He also said he didn't travel during the daytime unless law enforcement pushed him and he had to move. One thing he mentioned is that he didn't have night vision like law enforcement officers do. So really, it's just pitch dark out there. And also, just navigating rough terrain is difficult to do. And he just thinks it was easier for him to do that later in the evening. He didn't expect him to be at the jail very long. And like I said, it was pretty quick. They had him go into the state prison. They were just going to have him there long enough to interview him and get him processed. So canines are trained to go to the person, grab whatever is closest, and detain the individual until officers move in. The canines don't just keep biting and releasing or cause additional injury. Once officers move in, the canine will be pulled off of the person by the canine officer. And dogs typically are not let go from long distances. There are typically officers nearby in these situations. And Bivens says he believes the canine was a larger part of the reason that Danilo was not able to use that rifle that he had on him. Border Patrol was there because of their training in tracking and pursuing. They also have technology and resources to aid in searches just like this one, and their experience in all types of terrains. They performed observation and searches day and night for him, and they also had their own tactical teams there to assist. Now, the mayor said that whoever had their Eagles hoodie stolen to let him know, and they'll do their best to get them a new Kelly green one. That was one of the more funny moments of the presser. Then a reporter brought up a very real problem, which is you've had 2 escapes from 2 separate people in the same year. And the reporter asked, what would you say to people in the community and how are you going to prevent this from happening again? Bivens said that the DOC will assist in any work needed to secure that facility. And he said, obviously, they have a lot of work to do in that area. He said he can't put a price tag on the daily search, but eventually they may try to put a number on it. He said Danilo liked to travel via creek beds, the paths of less resistance, wood lines, power lines, and gas lines. He said this is fairly normal when somebody is on the run because people don't want to constantly go through heavy underbrush. When asked if he had a base camp, Bivens said he was more mobile. He didn't have a central place he kind of came back to. They won't say what prison he is sent to, but he said it may be released at a later time. They don't think that he had any means of communication to inform anybody of where he was. And when asked about the possibility of him escaping again, Bivens said, not while in our custody, and he believes the corrections department will absolutely be able to securely house him. He was caught within a few hundred yards inside that eastern edge of the perimeter that they outlined just yesterday. When asked about Danilo's sister and mother being in the U.S., he said his mother is not here. As we know, the sister is being deported. When asked if Bivens intended to have a conversation with him, he said no, that they have investigators that are competent and will get the information they need if he talks. Now, his mother had spoken to the New York Times before his capture, and she's out of touch, y'all. I mean, I understand supporting your kids, but this is like on another level. She said his life has trained him to live alone and overcome hardships, and she thinks that that was benefiting him while he was running. She said he was fighting to survive. She said his training was his suffering and said he would go to sleep hungry and she would wonder what she was going to feed him. She said he never attended school and began working at the age of 5, shining shoes, and then sold vegetables at a market. By the time he was 7, he was working in the fields on a farm. She says as a family, they're humble, they're poor, and they are workers. She told the publication they have fought for everything they have. So in 2014, he got a job managing a cattle ranch, and his family bought land next door where they raised cattle and horses. He left his job after murdering that Brazilian student named Junior that was over the unpaid car repair debt he had. She also said her son didn't pose a threat to anyone, even if he was armed. I think somebody needs to tell that to the 2 families who are now grieving because of her son. She didn't deny his guilt in the 2 murders. He stabbed his ex-girlfriend, as we know, in front of her children. And his mother said, did it happen? It happened. But it happened because of the stranglehold she put on him, the stance she took with him. She said that, y'all. He had to. He had no other choice. She did say he should face consequences for his crimes, but says life in prison or dying at the hands of another is unjust. She said, if I said my son didn't make a mistake, I'd be lying. I know what my son did was wrong. I know my son should have to pay for his mistakes, but I want my son to pay for his mistakes with dignity, not to pay with his life. Y'all, I have a fly in here and y'all see it zipping around. After this podcast, there will be a fly murder in the studio. I'm over it. Authorities have been blasting her message to her son on speakers where she is speaking in Portuguese, urging her son to turn himself in. She said the audio was requested through her daughter and she had not personally spoken with police at the time she gave this interview. She said with life in prison on the horizon for her son, he may be better off dead, saying, if it's to go to a place to suffer and die in that place, it's better to die soon. You don't have to suffer so much just to die later. Today, I see my son as dead, in a strange place, trampled, everyone lying about him, saying he's something that he's not. She said if she could talk to her son, it wouldn't be to tell him to surrender, rather that he asked God to forgive him for what he did. Y'all, she is out in left field with this thinking. He came to the U.S. in 2018, and his mother said he went there to work, to change his life, and to get somewhere, saying her son loved life here in the United States. He felt at home there, except he didn't know what was waiting for him there. He was arraigned officially at 10:30 this morning on a felony escape charge, as we know, transported to prison. Lieutenant Colonel Bivens later told CNN that he was defiant and still resisting arrest after his capture. He said the fugitive was like somebody who had been out in the woods for an extended period of time and stressed, which is exactly what we were trying to do all along. The whole point was to keep him stressed, keep him moving, and keep him off his game. Now, Sarah, the sister of his ex, Deborah, is the one he murdered, said he seemed nice enough at first, but quickly turned into a jealous boyfriend who could get violent with her sister. She said he became very different after drinking alcohol, and he told Deborah at one point he would do the worst thing to her if she ever cheated on him. Now, Sarah cares currently for Deborah's children. She was really worried that he may come after the family again, and she said she was really terrified for the kids. Now, a hearing on that escape charge will be held on September 27th, so we'll keep you updated on that. Moving on to Bryan Kohberger. Big thank you to Brian Inton for doing an amazing job tweeting this hearing today. It was not streamed. This hearing today was about cameras in the courtroom. After court was in session, an attorney for the Media Coalition argued the media does have a right to intervene when it comes to First Amendment and access issues, and the people have a right to see what is happening in the courtroom. She also said that people should not have to travel to see what's happening, and said there's an increasing need for people to watch for themselves to see what's going on in courtrooms across the country. They asked the judge to consider a pool camera, which is one camera, and then that footage is given to all the media, is actually what they're doing now. The judge referenced Lori and Chad Daybell and said that the media was portrayed as interested parties, but the judge doesn't see the media as being able to intervene regarding cameras in this case. He said he will still consider the media's argument to allow cameras. The defense spoke, and they are worried having cameras inside will make this into a spectacle, and people on social media will take images and manipulate them. They don't like where cameras are placed in the courtroom, and they feel as if a camera is directly behind them. They did say if cameras are allowed, the defense team wants them moved around from where they currently have been at. The judge mentions that on C-SPAN, they allow cameras on the House floor, and maybe a compromise is just to have that camera all the way in the back of the courtroom, which I think we all could agree. If you got that option or no cameras, we'll take back of the courtroom. I mean, I, for one, don't care to look at Kohberger, to be honest. I don't care. I just want to hear what's going on. The state argued the media is important in court cases, but they want to protect witnesses who are vulnerable and also shield the public from graphic evidence. They think the only way to do this is not to allow cameras inside. The judge says the media has pushed the envelope, and the media attorney said that the camera operators are now getting wider shots, but they can't control if people zoom in to get a better look at Kohberger on their own. The judge wondered if it's dignified to have cameras in the courtroom, and actually used O.J. Simpson as an example, calling it a circus. And it really was a circus. Do you guys remember the dancing Edos on, I think it was Jay Leno or something? But the judge asked the media to back off some and says he doesn't know if he can trust the media to do the right thing. He clarifies it's not the camera operators, but where the video is shared, and also talks about commentators talking about the hearings. Gonna happen regardless of whether we have cameras in there or not, because you're gonna have media in there. It's just, what do you hear? You know, you whisper one thing in one ear, and as it goes down the line, it changes. I think that's the biggest risk in not allowing cameras in the courtroom. What you don't want is a lot of speculation about what was actually said in the courtroom. It's kind of my opinion. And I think there are ways to remedy not focusing in on Kohberger. That was the big argument in Vallow, is that they're watching her every move and they're scrutinizing it. And we lost cameras in that. No still photography, and only got audio at the end of the day. What do y'all think? Let me know in the comments. He said the media is not the same as 10 years ago with social media in play, and also says this isn't entertainment. It's tragic. And that's very true. This is not entertainment, but at the same time, this new media we have, where you have news media, you have journalists, you have YouTubers, podcasters, content creators who all are interested in this case. And the thing is, it's not going to change. That's the one thing I think that a lot of these judges and attorneys have to understand, is that it's not going backwards. You're not going to have social media take a break from scrutinizing this stuff. It is what it is. It's where we are as society. So now the courts have to figure out how to work around that. He said he wishes people had more respect for what is happening. The media attorney says not having cameras inside the courtroom can further bad information, and having cameras is the only way to ensure the real source of what's happening is out there to the public. The judge then tells the media he wants them to be respectful, decent, and peaceful. The defense says they're not looking to throw out the media, but they are looking to throw out those cameras. The judge said the issue is powerful and it will take a lot of balancing to factor into his decision. He also said trials that allowed cameras in the past have gotten out of control. Ultimately, he didn't make a decision today. He will rule at a later time. I'm curious to see what happens with that one. I do have a feeling he's going to ban cameras in this courtroom. They use Vallow Daybell as an example, and just some of the language he used kind of lets you see where he stands on it. Moving on to a story out of Connecticut, where a actually out of Cromwell, Connecticut, where a 2-year-old was found dead in a river. This is a bizarre story. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of facts we know, but let's go through what we know. This might be one to follow. State police are asking if anyone saw anything involving a 2-vehicle crash that happened Monday in Cromwell, Connecticut on the exit 29 on-ramp to Route 9 South. Police responded to the scene about 5:20 Monday. One of the cars was unoccupied when they arrived. Now, Devani Miller, who is 24, and her 2-year-old daughter, who has just today been identified as Deroyal Miller, hit the rear bumper of another car, which caused Devani's car to cross the center median and hit a metal guardrail on that right shoulder. Now, after the crash, the woman and the 2-year-old got out of their car and walked down this steep embankment to the Connecticut River at exit 29. Police do not know if this was intentional or not. Firefighters responded and combed that riverbank after being told the mom and her daughter had left the car and hadn't been found. So they brought in thermal imaging cameras to try and find the two, since the accident was super close to that steep embankment and also that riverbank. It took 2 hours to find the woman walking on Route 9 North. She was taken to the hospital for evaluation, but after realizing that the 2-year-old was not with her mommy, they called in Marine teams to search. Deroyal Miller was found by the Portland firefighter Marine team in a rocky part of the riverbank in the water. Connecticut State Police say shortly thereafter, an unresponsive child was discovered in a rocky area of the nearby Connecticut River. Life-saving measures were initiated at the scene, and the child was transported to the hospital by ambulance. The child was pronounced dead at 9:23 p.m., and the Division of Children and Families were notified. Just of note, this Division of Children and Families had never had any contact with this family in the past. State police say the death of the child is deemed suspicious and remains under investigation. They're asking anyone who may have been in the area to contact Connecticut State Police if they saw anything or happened to capture anything on their dash cam footage. Moving on to Alec Murdaugh. He's due back in court tomorrow at 9 a.m. in Beaufort County. For the first time since this trial. It's going to be the first time we see him in person and not on those tablet selfies. This is a status conference in the financial crimes against the family of Gloria Satterfield. He tried to waive his appearance, but Judge Newman said, "You coming, buddy." Russell Laffitte and Cory Fleming also have hearings tomorrow. It's interesting. They could cross paths maybe in their holding cells before their respective hearings, but Cory Fleming will be sentenced after pleading guilty to 23 counts. And Russell Laffitte, the former CEO of the Palmetto State Bank, is in court for a status conference for the 21 state charges against him. Also of note, the deadline for the Attorney General to respond to the jury tampering allegations is due this Friday. I'm very interested to see what that says. I will keep up with it and bring it to you. If I didn't have to take Grammy to the doctor tomorrow, I would totally head down to Beaufort for this hearing. Got to take care of Grammy, 89 and fabulous, and we want to keep her till she's 109. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to get this haircut before CrimeCon, because y'all going to be like, that ain't Gigi, that's Cousin It. So lots to do, busy days coming up, but we're going to keep you posted on all the cases we've been covering. If I mispronounced Danilo's name like 50 times the wrong way, my bad. It's just one of those names. I know somebody with a similar name, and then my brain gets all jumbled up, but you get the point. All right, guys, appreciate your patience in this late one tonight. Hope you have a good rest of your night. We'll see you tomorrow.